Caitlin Huey Burns is a CBSN political contributor and a national political reporter for Real Clear Politics. Okay, Caitlin, so there's a lot here.
Yeah.
You know, usually these meetings that take place, especially a big one like this one with North Korea, are highly choreographed.
Sure.
The president was asked on Saturday exactly when he would know when Kim Jong Un was really serious about this. I'm going to play that bite for you right now.
I think within the first minute, I'll know. Just my touch, my feel. That's what I do. How long will it take to figure out whether or not they're serious? I said maybe in the first minute. You know, the way they say that you know if you're going to like somebody in the first 5 seconds. You ever hear that one? Well, I think that very quickly I'll know whether or not something good is going to happen.
A lot of pressure there for Kim Jong Un. You got a couple of seconds to make it work here. I mean,
exactly.
Is winging it what he's saying he's going to be doing?
Well, remember earlier this week, he said that he doesn't really have to prepare that much for this meeting, that it's all about attitude. Now, of course, that overlooks all of the negotiations and choreography that has been going on behind the scenes, but it shows kind of an insight into the way in which the president is approaching this meeting. And we've seen him over the past week or so kind of tampering down expectations a little bit. Remember, the administration is continuing to push the idea that they want North Korea to abandon its nuclear program in a very tangible way. But the president also a few days ago was talking about, you know, the end of the Korean War being a big success, if that is in fact achievable. And so a lot of questions, of course, going into this meeting surrounding the way in which the president is or is not prepared. But that sentiment that he expressed really reminded me of former President Bush, the way in which he talked about meeting with Putin and looking into his eyes. Of course, he was criticized for that later as we saw Russian transgressions over the course of the next several years. The president isn't shamed in the way that other presidents have. And in fact, he's driven in large part by doing things that his predecessors wouldn't or couldn't do. The question is what exactly we will get from this beyond a photo opportunity.
You know, the president said he has a clear objective of where he wants to go. He's also said that this will be a spur-of-the-moment thing. He's told reporters he wants to work on building a relationship with Kim Jong Un, which everyone can understand. But on the other side of it, he also says he wants them to denuclearize. So where do you see this headed?
Well, there is a big question about what could actually happen here, because remember, just a couple of weeks ago, the president canceled this meeting altogether. Then he said that the North Korean leader sent him a letter, a very nice letter as he described it, that kind of helped the meeting get back on. But in that time, we didn't really learn anything about what North Korea actually plans to give up. And so I think that's a big, question mark here. And again, I think that's why we've seen the administration kind of tempering down expectations a little bit. What's interesting, though, is Secretary of State Pompeo has actually met with the North Korean leader twice. But interestingly enough, when he was asked by reporters on Friday whether or not he trusted this leader, he said, he didn't really answer directly. And I think that was a really notable moment here about the trust with this country.
He's probably the one American who's had most contact with Kim Jong Un, and still he's a little bit cautious, as rightfully so, folks would say. You know, the president keeps using the words peace and prosperity for the North Koreans. Is that the real selling point for them?
Well, he's trying to kind of urge them to, become a player in a way, insofar as he's been talking about, make this a better deal for your own country. I mean, I'm not sure how that plays in North Korea, given that they obviously do not operate the way that others might be more incentivized to. And so there is the big question about whether whether North Korea is actually getting more out of this than the U.S. and allies are, given that, just by virtue of being seen on the national stage with the President of the United States in Singapore, whether that legitimizes a rogue regime with a number of, human rights violations and other things. So big questions about what actually comes out of this beyond a photo op.
And obviously, all this North Korea talk is happening during the G7 summit as well, which was used to be called the G8. Russia, of course, not allowed in because of their annexation of Crimea. I want to play a bite for you of the president suggesting that Russia should be readmitted.
I think it would be good for the world. I think it would be good for Russia. I think it would be good for the United States. I think it would be good for all of the countries of the current G7. I think the G8 would be better. I think having Russia back in would be a positive thing. We're looking for peace in the world. We're not looking to play games.
So he told reporters there that Russia was expelled from the G8 because something happened. That was his line. Something happened. Something really significant actually happened, Caitlin. But
exactly.
What do you make of his
Exactly.
talk?
That thing that happened was the Russian annexation of Crimea, which all of the countries agreed was a huge violation of the agreement that they had. That's why they were kicked out. The president, of course, then kind of blamed Obama for that transgression, which was really an interesting insight to how he views this whole entire framework here. This has raised, this kind of meeting is supposed to be a pretty boring meeting, right? This is, a meeting with all of our allies. Canada, of course, hosting this meeting. The fact that this has become such a contentious summit before the North Korean summit is really telling, and it has raised a lot of alarm bells among experts about whether the president is trying to establish some kind of new world order here. Of course, we know that Russia meddled in our election. The intelligence community has said as much, and also the Trump administration has acted on that with sanctions. And so we're seeing the president try to kind of create this new relationship with Putin, create a new relationship with Kim Jong Un, all the while, lashing out against allies who have been there for the U.S. for a long time. Now, of course, on the issue of trade, this is something the president has been talking about for 30 years. The question is, how these countries react, how that affects American citizens that he says he's trying to protect.
Speaking of using the Obama administration sort of as whipping them over their past policies, he also talked about trade, and he said that, he suggested world leaders consider no tariffs and no subsidies whatsoever. Is that really realistic? Do they believe that that's going to happen?
Well, the president has talked a lot about his want to establish these bilateral trade agreements. Remember, he's withdrawn from other kind of world agreements, the Paris Climate Accord, obviously TPP, with these, tariffs on steel and aluminum, not exempting Canada and Mexico and other countries from this. He is trying to send a message, right, that he believes that the U.S. has paid for too much and has been ripped off. The question, though, is that, what kind of deal is the president making here, right? This has certainly...
Could this backfire, too, Caitlin?
It could certainly...
what could the Europeans do at this point that could stick it to America?
It could certainly backfire in terms of retaliatory tariffs that could actually hit, a lot of areas where Trump's core constituency is. And so when we talk about what the consequences for the president are, we haven't really seen much politically, but remember, we're heading into a midterm. We could see some reaction among voters to perhaps retaliatory measures if they, in fact, happen.
A lot to watch this summer. It's going to be a busy summer, Caitlin. Caitlin Huey Burns, grateful you could join us.
Thank you.